The videos I've released on my channel should hopefully go some way to evidence the fact that I have quite eclectic tastes. I've always focused my channel around stories and reviews of watches I actually own, but when I look through horological YouTube, the main thing I'm actually interested in is watches and brands that I don't know about. I love hearing about a new brand and going down a rabbit hole to find out about their history and the models that they offer. To that end, I wanted to put together a video of my own highlighting 5 of the lesser known brands that I've been looking into recently and discussing the interesting models that they offer. Just for reference, these are all going to be more budget friendly brands, with the most expensive watch featured coming in at just under £1,500, but many of the models costing significantly less. The Fire Exit model from William Wood is currently on pre-order for a release in September 2024. It's one of the most expensive models I'm going to feature in this video, and if the name and design wasn't clear enough, the watch is inspired by the fire exit safety sign. It's certainly not the first place I would have thought designers went to for inspiration, but I really like the aesthetic and colourway. It has a unique complication with a day indicator that shows the safety man as he goes through his working week. The watch is packed with thoughtful little features like this, like the illuminated font on the back, the directional hours as markers on the dial, the safety man on the crown of the watch, and the custom arrow motif on the buckle of the strap. My favourite element of the watch is actually the colour. I'm a real sucker for green, and the various tones here work so well together for my eye. The watch is a little too big and a little too thick for me to consider purchasing, but it's definitely a brand I'm going to keep my eye on moving forwards. The other models they offer feature a range of other niche fire-related inspirations for their designs, with the main inspiration being the British Fire Service, in honour of the brand's founder's grandfather, the man after whom the brand is named, and the reason for the fire helmet serving as the brand's emblem. If they do start making smaller watches, I'll definitely be interested. I was put onto this brand by a comment on a recent video of mine, and it's one of a range of US based brands that to my mind haven't really crossed the Atlantic that much. The same is true for brands like Zelos that I've featured on the channel recently. While the prices are enticing, once you factor in shipping and import tax, suddenly the models aren't quite so financially appealing. With Aragon themselves, there are so many models on the company website, I actually struggled getting started with this brand. The design language across most of the range is chunky, thick bezels and handsets, and to accommodate for that, most of the watches are far too big for me, with a lot of the ranges being between 44 and 50mm in diameter. What struck me about the brand though is how colourful a lot of the models are, and the bike chain inspired bracelets which I've not seen anywhere else. While I'm sure some of the models like the Concept S are not going to be to everyone's tastes, I really like the fact that unlike a lot of brands, they are making their own original models. After scouring through the website, the model that caught my eye the most was the DM42 Swiss Meteorite. It isn't a colourful or particularly original design like some of the others, but I'm a big fan of Meteorite as a dial material, and I've never seen a watch feature it across the bezel as well before. A little too big for me to consider purchasing, but again, another brand I'm going to keep my eye on in future if the models do start to get smaller. Now in the last video on my channel, I discussed owning a tourbillon because I love looking at the movement, and while I'm not that interested in the watch that houses it, the movement alone is enough for me. To that end, Zerich is a brand that very much focuses on movement first, and just like Aragon, they aren't afraid to be bold with their designs and use of colour. Telling the time in non-conventional ways often requires more space though, so most Zerich models start at 42mm or above, which is a little too big for me, but I am interested in the brand from the perspective of interesting talking points for my collection. If you've seen my retrospective on the Moonswatch range, you'll know about my love of space and exploration, so it isn't a surprise that my favourite model from Zerich is the NASA Artemis Tumbler. The one thing that you can be sure of with a watch like this is it's guaranteed to be a talking point every time you put it on. I also want to highlight the inverter models, which position the movement as the main focus of the watch. Much like Chinese tourbillons, Zerich are a brand that are offering complications and design ideas that would traditionally have been only available through unconventional high-end Swiss watchmakers like MB&F. These aren't exactly daily drivers, but there aren't many brands out there pushing the budget envelope in the same way as Zerich. Now, having said that, the models discussed are pushing the idea of being budget friendly, but Zerich do offer a number of cheaper alternatives that still tell the time in unique ways, but are considerably more friendly to your bank balance. Of the brands featured in this video, Yemma are perhaps the most storied. In recent years, the French brand have made waves with the design language of their manufacturer-grade calibers. These have such a sleek and futuristic form, which presents complex watchmaking in a clear, bold style. You may have seen adverts for the Urban Traveller or Superman before, both excellent watches in their own right, so I wanted to focus on a model that's had nowhere near as much of the limelight. That is the Urban Flygraph. It's a delicate mixture of both detail and simplicity. It has an inner and outer bezel, but has such a good use of white space that it doesn't feel too busy. The use of yellow to complement the monochromatic form fits perfectly with the aviation theme of the watch and puts me in mind of an airport departure board. Now, the model doesn't feature one of those manufacturer-grade calibers, but even the standard-grade Yemma 2000 is still an in-house movement. The sizing is on point for me at 39mm, and the angular design of the bracelet fits the watch neatly into the 1980s theme. Yemma were founded in 1948, and this is based on their actual models from the 80s. Of all the brands and models I've featured in the video, the Flygraph is definitely the one that I'm most likely to actually purchase. The only downside of the watch for me is functionality. The bezels serve as a flight tool to calculate things like airspeed and fuel consumption. I will never get any use out of that, but then I'd get no real use out of dive bezels either, and I don't complain about those. Frankly, it's a good job I'm skint at the moment, or in the process of making this video I absolutely would have bought a Flygraph. The final brand I'm going to discuss doesn't really focus on watches. Really, their output is wall clocks, but they have a wristwatch model, and like what we've seen from Zerich earlier in the video, it has a unique way of telling the time, but a form factor that's really quite appealing to me. Rather than telling the time with the watch tells you the time. Known simply as the Q-Lock 2 wristwatch, the model comes in two sizes, 35 and 39mm. Given that the watch is square, it's going to wear bigger than its size would indicate, so I'd personally be looking at the smaller of the two models. The watch is powered by a quartz movement, but to tell the time, you press a button on the right hand side and it illuminates the time on the display for you. There are a couple of ways of looking at this. If this had a digital display, you'd be paying around £10 to £20 for a Casio that did the exact same thing. The cheapest I've seen any of these models advertised is just under £600, so you're paying quite a lot for a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist, and also a unique design language. It does look really cool though, and again, like some of the other brands featured, it's an interesting talking point. Taking a short aside away from the wristwatch offering, visiting the official Q-Lock 2 website, which is in German, points towards what is essentially a wall-mounted analog moon phase complication. While it doesn't exist, it does make me wonder if a combination of their moon and earth-based designs would be possible in a watch. If it was, it certainly would be the most unique moon phase out there. If nothing else, as a brand, they've certainly been the first that has ever made me seriously consider purchasing a clock for my wall at home. Hopefully, I've been able to introduce some of you to a new brand or model with this video. I'm always keen to know about new brands and models, or just ones I've not heard of before, so if you've got some niche suggestions, please let me know in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed watching or found this video useful, please consider dropping the video a like and subscribing for more content like this.